Welcome to the Monday morning edition of the 14 podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Barry Allen joins me, bleary-eyed but also bushy-tailed, as we are excited to talk baseball. Barry, what a weekend it was. It's not done yet, as there's Monday night games to be played and Monday afternoon games to be played. We're not going to focus on those much because the shelf life of a podcast this time of the year, frankly, isn't long, but we're going to talk about the teams that have moved on to supers, the teams that are done, and so much has happened. I got in from the ballpark at 2:25 this morning, covering a 5-hour and 5-minute game. I don't even know where to start with what we saw this weekend, but my goodness, the storylines were compelling, the baseball was great, and this is what we live for.
Yeah, there's been a lot of baseball. I don't know that anybody has time to go and count up all the home runs and the pitches that have been thrown this weekend, but there's been a lot of really good games, a lot of excitement. We've already set the record for most home runs in the BB Core era in a regional. We're pushing 300 home runs going into Monday. Several games to go today, so I think 300 is attainable. Just some really, you're looking at the SEC, just some really good storylines and, some head scratchers as well. What's going on, and then what's going on nationally, not SEC that have clinched, Notre Dame, tremendous weekend at home. I think they were a little miffed that they were not a national seed, being the ACC champion, and they took it out on their field and had a 26-run outburst and ton of home runs there. And they're awaiting the Mississippi State Campbell winner. I think that'll be one of the more intriguing super regionals next week. If Notre Dame comes to Starkville and plays Mississippi State, I think that'll be one of the most entertaining super regionals there is. But just a lot of, Tennessee, we'll get into them, but unbelievable story for them, from ashes to their first ever super regional hosting at home next week. And, then the disappointments of Florida and South Carolina and their showings in the regionals as well. But a lot of national storylines and, some games tonight that offer some intrigue. And then, also looking at super regional matchups next week, you're going to have one super regional pairing where neither team is the home team, and how the NCAA is going to handle that. It looks like Dallas Baptist or Oregon State will take on Old Dominion or Virginia, and none of those were among the hosts. And so we're interested to see how that's going to be, since they had to clear the hosts ahead of time. Will that be played at TCU? Will that be played at Oregon? Would Oregon State host at Oregon if they were to win? Just down the road from Corvallis. If Virginia wins or Old Dominion wins, would they be hosting at East Carolina or somewhere? So a lot of intrigue with that, and something that the NCAA, will discuss today and let us know tomorrow when these games are completed what exactly is going to happen. But a lot of baseball this weekend. If you did not get your fill of baseball this weekend, it is your fault.
Now, to that, I thought that they could only be hosted at the 20 predetermined sites. Has there been some sort of change or modification? Because I think that you've got to play those regionals somewhere, and it only is going to be in one of those 20 ballparks. Am I wrong about that?
No, I think it has to be. I don't know if it's one of the 20. It may be one of the 16. Just reading some stuff yesterday, once the 4 teams weren't chosen, they kind of dropped out of protocol maybe, and it may be one of the 16. So that's what I'm saying. If Oregon State were to win, then they could host at Oregon, because Oregon is one of the 16. That might be an interesting thing, that the Ducks allow the Beavers to come and host a regional there. And Dallas Baptist, I think, would have to host at TCU at Lupton Stadium if that were the case. And Old Dominion and Virginia, they would have to. I think it would have to be either at South Carolina or East Carolina, one of those venues to do that, unless they come in now and change. I mean, lots happened in the last month or so, unless the committee comes in and goes, well, you know what, we can do this just on one park on short notice. So I'm not exactly sure what they're going to do, but I think from what I've read, it has to be one of the one of the 16 that was in play this weekend, and the 4 that were ruled out last week are not. I don't think those are in play anymore.
I can barely keep track of what happened, much less where this is headed. And let's get back to what happened for a minute. Let me reset things for you. Right now, as we do this Monday morning, you've got Mississippi State, Ole Miss, Arkansas, and LSU will all be playing winner-take-all games on Monday night. So we're going to talk about all those teams on the Tuesday podcast, presuming these games all get played. I know you have some weather issues in some parts of the country. So we're going to basically table talking about those 4 teams. You got 3 teams whose seasons are over in Alabama, South Carolina, and Florida, and you have only 2 teams that have advanced to the Super so far, which I definitely would not have expected heading into this time Monday, but here we are. And I say 2 teams, more than that, have advanced, but that's 2 from the SEC. And let's talk about the first team to clinch things. Tennessee, the Vols, my goodness, had a wild one, a walk-off grand slam. I think it's called the ultimate slam when you're down 3 and you hit one to walk off and you win by 1. But just a super tough regional in Knoxville where the runs were scoring all weekend until the Sunday night game. Who would have thought that? The one pitcher's duel I think that they have basically is in the game where everybody's least fresh with their pitching staffs, but that's baseball sometime. But what did you make of the Vols series in Knoxville? That just looked like, when I watched here and there, just an electric atmosphere with 4 really good teams.
Well, it was, and they interviewed, ESPN did, Tony Vitello after the game last night, and I don't think it'll come as a surprise to anybody, but he was a little furious at the bracket that they had. And he said it took them a couple of days to get in line to play this. And he even said himself on the telecast last night, he said at one point during the week, he said, I probably acted like a 6 or a 7-year-old. And he said, it kind of took us a while to get going. He said, we were devastated because we didn't win the SEC tournament. Then we came home and we found out we were playing, the field that we had. He said Wright State was about as much of a 4 seed as anybody. He said, there's no way that was a 4 seed. And he said, that's brutal. And then you start watching video and getting scouting reports on these teams. And he's like, God, I don't know if we can win. He said, these teams are really good. I mean, Liberty is really good. They were an at-large from the A-Sun. Duke won the ACC tournament. They were an automatic. And Wright State was the Horizon League champion, and they were an automatic. And Chris, you and I talked about this last week. We thought that was the most difficult regional out there, and it lived up to its billing. And if you didn't hit a home run in that regional, you didn't have a chance, because that was the launching pad regional. There were over 30 home runs hit in the 6 games in that regional, 9 by Tennessee and Wright State in the opener Friday night in a thrilling game. I mean, one of the best games in the tournament. Liberty came out and swung the bats really well. They had a kid, Gulaski, hit 2 3-run homers in the opening game against Duke. Then Duke hammered Wright State, surprisingly, in game 3 on Saturday. But, after such a tough loss, it's hard to turn around and play that next game, and that's what Wright State had to do. And then, Tennessee beat Liberty 9-3 Saturday night with a bunch of home runs. And then we get into the pitcher's duel last night with Will Heflin and Sean Hunley taking over. And, Will Heflin was an intriguing story for Tennessee. Here's a guy that's pitching the championship game of the regional, win this game, and we go to the super regional. They run a guy out there who started 12 SEC games this year and did not win a game in this league. He's 0-2 in this league in 12 SEC starts. He had not won a game since March the 5th. And Will Heflin walks out there last night and gives them a career-high 8 strikeouts and 5 1/3 innings and turns the game over to Sean Hunley, who closes it out and gets the save. They get a 2-run homer from Drew Gilbert to win the game in the 5th or 6th inning. And I think Tony Vitello said after the game he believes that's the first time this year that Hunley and Heflin, who I think he said were roommates and best friends, that was the first time this year that Heflin had stood on the mound and given Hunley the ball. He said they've pitched in the same games before, but it's usually a bridge between one to the other. And he said, I believe that was the first time. And he said, and I admit I got a little emotional watching those two guys. You could just see their connection and watching those two guys as Will and I walked off the mound last night. But that was a tremendous regional. The atmosphere was outstanding. Uh, if they bring that energy next weekend to play Oregon or LSU, whomever that might be, that's going to be a hard place for somebody to go play next week. And Drew Gilbert was the MVP, homered in every game for Tennessee. Lipsius had 2 home runs Saturday night. Spence had 2 home runs Saturday night. It was just kind of a launching pad weekend in Knoxville, and probably one of the greatest. I'd have to talk to Chris Burke and some of the older guys that's been around, Jeff Muir, who's been around a long, long time. But that might be the greatest 3 games in the history of Tennessee baseball in that stadium. I don't know that there's any other way you could say that, just because of the magnitude and then them winning and hosting their first ever super regional in Knoxville. But Tony Vitello has turned the Tennessee baseball program completely around.
It's been interesting. I have a lot of friends. I think as people know, I live in the Nashville area, so I have a lot of really good friends who are Tennessee fans. And as everybody knows, we're very passionate about college baseball. And I've wanted to see those people get to experience it for themselves. And I've just said, man, this is a great game that you guys are kind of missing it. And you see a lot of them start to get it over the years, is a lot of Tennessee fans that I know have tuned in to watch Vanderbilt in the College World Series and the Supers. And I think that they have kind of felt that the baseball was compelling, but they didn't really have a dog in the hunt. I remember telling people around 2019, I think this guy's really going to get it done. He's getting it together. And, then you had 2020 that came and wiped out the season. And then this year early, they were pretty good. And people started jumping on board. And really, I think, Barry, that series with Vanderbilt, because Vanderbilt's such a big deal in state here in Tennessee, I think the fact that Tennessee went into a series really sort of viewed as almost a peer with Vanderbilt, at least in terms of this year. And then that one went down to the wire. And I think that people started to figure it out there. You saw the crowds, they were electric. I think that's a fan base now that kind of gets it in terms of baseball and excitement. And you'd like to see that happen at some other schools. I mean, Florida, my goodness, we'll get to the Gators. I don't understand what in the world is going on with that program and that fan base, but it was really cool to see how energized that fan base and that team was and that city was all weekend, because this is a fun party. You kind of want everybody there to enjoy and experience it. I think the folks in Knoxville are finally figuring that out.
Yeah, they've had success in the past. In the mid-'90s, the Helton and Dickey era, and then with Chris Burke and Wyatt Allen in the, early 2000s. But it's been some lean years in Knoxville for baseball for quite a while, and not a lot of excitement. It was always usually one of the places that you knew when you were working in the league that you could go and there would be no one there, and they were not any good. And even though you might not be very good, you could win at least 2 and maybe sweep. And a lot of teams kind of looked at Tennessee as kind of the whipping boy in the conference, and that's not the case anymore. This team won their division. They won, they're a national seed. I mean, they to try to say where they were to where they are now, you just can't really describe that to people, because it's unbelievable to what they've done. And now go do it again. I mean, it's one time, and say, well, anybody can find lightning in a bottle one time, but I don't know that this is going to be just one time for them. But I've been to Knoxville many times for baseball games, and you could thrown a bottle out of the press box into the stands and not hit a soul. I mean, it's just nobody there. And these crowds this weekend were electric. They were full. Now, they're not 12,000 like they are in Arkansas or Mississippi State or Ole Miss, but, that's not their fault. They have what they have, and they added some bleachers this weekend. They added some stuff in the outfield and down the lines, and they maximized what they had, and the crowds were electric. And I mean, it was fun to watch. I mean, that Friday night game was so fun to watch and so exciting. To see him hit that home run and walk off the home run, I was actually afraid that he was so excited about it. He started flipping his helmet and doing trots and stuff. I was actually afraid the kid was going to not touch home plate. And I'm like, there, get to the plate, silly, get to the plate. Somebody get him to, because I was afraid he was just going to be so excited and forget to touch home plate, and then they're going to appeal and he's out and it's tied and all that emotion. I was like, just get to the bases and get the home plate. That's what I was real concerned for. But it was a fun atmosphere. And you look around the league, some of these other teams, Alabama, Auburn, Florida, Kentucky, teams like that, Georgia, who've had passionate fan bases in the past, and just you sit there and you wonder, why can't that happen at these places? And because it was at Alabama for a long time, sellout crowds and great atmospheres, and unfortunately that's not Alabama, that's not the case any longer, and not at Auburn or Kentucky, and even Florida, as good as they've been. You could always go to Florida and there's no one there. And there was no one there this weekend. And that was sad to see, a brand new stadium and a national seed and have no crowds for their games. But Tennessee got it done this weekend on and off the field. And they are going to be a force to be reckoned with for quite a while.
Yeah, they are. I think if Tony Vitello stays there, which I talked to a couple people at Media Market this weekend, sounds like Tennessee's getting a really competitive effort to keep him there. And frankly, I think if I'm Vitello, if they do those things, I think I'd stay. I think that's a place where you can win, but you can maybe win without some of the expectations that you see at other places. No, look, that changes after a while. Once you breed success, it breeds more success, and sometimes that'll come back to bite you. But I want to talk about Tennessee's pitching for a minute, Barry. I mean, when we talk about the best arms in the league, Tennessee is really never in that discussion, not because Tennessee's bad, just because they've got a lot of guys who are good and durable and not necessarily great. I mean, the things that grab headlines are that guy that goes 8 and gives up no runs and strikes out 14. Tennessee doesn't really have a bunch of guys like that. But I think Vitello has done a great job of managing their pitching staff. He seems to really have a good feel of when to pull and when not to pull. And let's look at the last few games. Let's start with May the 16th against Arkansas. And I'm cherry picking. They give up 3 runs to Arkansas and Knoxville. They give up 2 in the midweek game to Belmont, 4 at South Carolina, then 3 at South Carolina, then 4 at South Carolina. They give up 3 in 11 innings to Alabama in the SEC tournament, 2 to Mississippi State in 8 innings. They shut out Alabama in 11 in the SEC tournament, shut out Florida in the SEC tournament, give up 7 to Arkansas in the title game, and then they give up, after 8 to Wright State, they give up only 3 to a hot-hitting Liberty team and then 1. I just think that the way Tennessee is able to piece it together, again, if you say, does Tennessee have a top 10 pitcher in the league, I'm going to say they don't. But what they have are 8 or 9 guys who really complement each other, and they just seem to have a good feel of knowing when to make the move and who to go to, and in the end, it just all seems to work.
Well, I'll address the pitching first, but I also want to say something about Tennessee and their success again. They're the only team in the league that has put the guys on the same 3 guys on the mound all weekend long. Now, they didn't throw Dallas in the SEC tournament, but in the regular season, the 10 SEC weekends and the regional, their rotation was Dallas, Tidwell, and Heflin in some order. They held Dallas out for the SEC tournament. He didn't pitch any, but they've answered the bell every weekend on the mound with the same 3 guys. No one else in the league can say that. They've tweaked rotations. They've had injuries, whatever the situation may be. But they've run the same 3 guys out Friday, Saturday, and Sunday all year long. And I think that gives you stability, and I think that helps you. And then when you have a bullpen, a veteran bullpen with Sean Hunley, who has, 7 wins and 8 saves, which is, tremendous numbers, kind of gets lost in the Kevin Kopps year with what they've done, with what he's done. And then you have Redmond Walsh, who's got 5 wins and 5 saves, and Camden Sewell, who's got 4 wins and 2 saves. they've got 45 appearances between those two guys. Then Kirby Connell has 26 appearances with a win and 2 saves. I mean, they've got 3 relief pitchers that have pitched over 75 combined appearances. They use their bullpen, and they don't have Jackson Leith, who got hurt early in the year. This team could be even better. This is supposed to be one of their their weekend guys, Jackson Leith. He pitched 2 games and then was injured and has missed the rest of the year. And they've just placed, they've just pieced everything together. Elijah Pleasance has made 15 appearances. Connor Housley's made 12. Mark McLaughlin, 15. Will Mabry's made 12. I mean, they've got a lot of guys. They've used a lot of guys, have a lot of depth, but but it's the 3 starters, and then Hundley and Walsh and Sewell and Connell have really carried the bulk of it for them in their bullpen. We talk about their success. Not much going on for them, not much good for them over the last decade plus, and being good. I think a lot of that, some of that, they went out and they found Tony Vitello. He's turned things around, but I think Vanderbilt maybe kind of pushes that a little bit. Your in-state rival team, winning 2 national championships and, dominant program, not only just in the SEC, but in the country, kind of pushes that a little bit too. And they're sitting there going, well, dang, if Vanderbilt could do this, so can we. I mean, we're as good as they are. And I give you an example of that. Oregon State won back-to-back national championships in 2006 and 2007. Never been really that good, but, some decent teams, but never, nobody ever thought about Oregon State being a powerhouse in baseball. And they go win 2 national championships in a row. And Phil Knight, who's a huge Nike and a huge Oregon guy, is like, well, why can't we do this? Why don't we have a baseball team? Oregon's doesn't have baseball for 30 years. And he's like, well, Oregon State can win. Gee, we got more money than they got. We can do this too. And so they build a stadium, PK Park. They reinstate baseball. They hire George Horton from Cal State Fullerton and bring him to Oregon. Now, Oregon's never been to Omaha, but they've had some really good teams, and they're in the thick of it right now trying to go to a regional. It'd be kind of interesting if they beat LSU tonight. It'd be kind of interesting. Oregon against Tennessee next week, 2 teams that were basically forced to be good because their rival was good. And that will be kind of an interesting deal next week. But Oregon was nothing for 30-something years. They didn't even have a team. And Phil Knight sitting there one night watching Oregon State win their 2nd national title, and he goes, that's enough of that. We're going to get baseball. And he funds the whole program. And not only did he fuel them to win, but he just restarted the program from scratch. And I think maybe a little bit Tennessee sees that with Vanderbilt and say, hey, if our rival can do this, so can we. And I credit Tennessee for recognizing it and being able to go out and just say, hey, you know what? We're going to try to do this, and we're going to try to compete and win and go to Omaha every year. And they right now they're certainly in that mode. They have a shot, and they've had some success against Vanderbilt over the years with some series wins, and had a chance to win the series with them this year. So I credit Tennessee for being able to admit maybe, hey, our rival could do it, we can too. And then they went out and they found a coach that could punch the right buttons. Now they need to help him and give him a lot of resources to turn this thing into a every year contender like they have at Vanderbilt and Oregon.
Let's go to Vanderbilt. I was in Hawkins Field last night to the bitter end. That game ended at 1:10 in the morning Central Time. It was about 5 hours and 5 minutes. It had everything you can imagine, including a ton of pitches thrown and lots of home runs, which seems again to be a theme in NCAA play so far. Barry, you watched it from TV. I got my own takes on things from being there, but what did you think about that game and that regional?
Well, I thought, Vanderbilt just tried to survive. Last night I thought they dominated Presbyterian. I think Georgia Tech helped them out a little bit on Saturday, even though Leiter pitched really well, and they won 4-3. I was kind of surprised that we got Rocker in game 1 against Presbyterian. But each coach has to kind of look at his own team and thinking that goes, well, Vanderbilt can beat Presbyterian without Rocker and Leiter, but they don't really have that third guy that's they've struggled in that game all year long, and you saw that last night with the score being 14-11. So if you don't pitch Rocker game one and you lose to Presbyterian, then everybody's like, "What in the world are you doing?" Because I've seen that happen too. Where teams don't use their number one guy the first night and they get beat, and then they've got their best guy for the losers bracket game. And so I can see Tim's thought on that and some other guys' thoughts on that too. Not starting their best guy, but I thought they're clearly better than Presbyterian. They didn't obviously get a chance to see Indiana State, and then they just gutted out 2 wins against Georgia Tech. I mean, they fell behind early, they came back and took the lead, and then fell behind again, and then hit 2 home runs and got the lead. And as we talked before we came on the air, that 27th out just seems to be the hardest out in Vanderbilt baseball history, does it not? I mean, they just can't.
Yes, it's crazy. they will pitch a Maldonado or Murphy or somebody, and they'll just be mowing people down, and then they get to that last out of the game. This has been an issue for like 3 weeks now. It's just you watch them play, and you think it's about to be over, and like, no, knowing the way it's gone lately, it's there's going to be some drama here.
Well, I mean, they lost the game to Kentucky. I mean, down to a strike, and end up losing that game and losing the division because they couldn't get the last out against Kentucky. And then, last night, Georgia Tech, 2 outs, comes up. Luke Murphy's dealing. You're like, well, this is over. And the guy hits a pop up to left center field, and he keeps going. And I said, God, he's hit a home run in all 4 games now. And you could just tell it was going to go out by the way Vaz was kind of moving over towards left field, and it gets out, and it's they tie the game at 9, and then end up going to extra innings, and Thomas hits the grand slam in the 11th, and then Murphy gets hurt in the bottom of the 11th, and they have to take him out. And it also seems like they're just snake bit with injuries. I mean, it just seems like every day somebody new gets hurt. They have to find ways to piece things together and win, but they survived, and that's what they call postseason, survive and advance, and they did, and hopefully they'll be able to get Murphy back. You were there. You probably talked to Tim after the game. I don't know exactly what went on there. It looked like a cramp. I don't think it looked like anything really ultra serious, but that's what Greg Swindell called it looked like on TV, and just trying to get it together, and he just couldn't. And then what about the kid from Georgia Tech? It takes the line drive right off the ankle, and he's got to come out. And that set up that whole inning there. He'd been pitching pretty well, and they lined one right off of his ankle on his I guess not his plant foot, but his foot that he pushes off on the mound because he's left-handed, and he couldn't push off, and he couldn't finish the top of the inning either. And that's how Vanderbilt got brought in the reliever, and he walks a couple of guys, and he ends up giving up the grand slam. But they won. They'll be at home next week against a pretty good East Carolina club, who's one of those teams out there that's sneaky good, but hadn't ever quite figured out how to get past the regional or super regional to get to Omaha. So we'll see next weekend when they get at it. But I think Vanderbilt just probably needs to take a day today and maybe tomorrow and just kind of refocus on some things and try to get some guys healthy and just, I think they'll be fine. But, I think they probably felt like getting out of there this morning at, 2 a.m. or whatever it was. I think they were probably relieved more than they were happy.
Tim Corbin is a fantastic baseball coach and does a lot of great things. I didn't think they managed their pitching particularly well last night. I felt like you're sitting there watching Murphy, and you can see he's got a cramp. And I'm just thinking, why does somebody not stop the ball game, get him some water, some potassium tablets, something? Instead, he kept pitching and kind of paid for it, and it made the game a little bit more interesting. But there was that. But, to the injury thing with them, take Colwick, their starting second baseman, who missed, I think, 6 weeks with a hamate injury. He came back a couple of weeks ago, and on Friday night, in kind of a meaningless spot, took an extra base on a single to right. I can't remember if he was thrown out or not. I think he made it. But in any case, he comes up with his hand hurt, does not play the next 2 days. I don't know what his status is heading in the East Carolina series. Carter Young, their shortstop, who had his shoulder come out of socket a couple of weeks ago. His non-throwing shoulder is back. He missed the Kentucky series, which was the last one of the year for them. He missed the tournament in Hoover, and so he's back starting, but he's a switch hitter, and he was only hitting left-handed the first couple of games because of that shoulder. He started hitting right-handed again on Sunday night, is really not hitting the ball well at all right now. And sometimes that's not unexpected when you take some time to get your timing back. But he played shortstop, I thought, really well for them this weekend. Look, this is a team that's kind of limping along in some ways, but you look at the barrage of injuries they've sustained and just the fatigue to some players, and I still think that they are really dangerous heading into that ECU series. And frankly, I'd be surprised if they don't get to Omaha, because Rocker and Leiter both looked really good this weekend. And when those guys are looking good, as I've said all year, good luck beating Vanderbilt.
Yeah, I thought they pitched really well. Just look at their numbers. I wasn't there, you were, but just look at their numbers for the weekend. I thought both of those guys pitched well, and I thought they pitched well, the last couple of weekends. I think the one weekend they held Leiter out, I think really helped them, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think I'd like to see more coaches do that over the course of the season. Just, I know it's hard to do, but just sit a guy out for a weekend and just let him rest and give him a chance to, not only mentally rest, but physically rest his arm, and just kind of, it's a long season, it's a grind, and it's a hard deal to navigate through, and pitching is the key in these games. And we talked about that game last night, looking at their box score. Josiah Siegel started, I believe, the last inning for Vanderbilt, or he'd come in the game. He started for Tech, the 11th inning. He pitched in the inning. John Medich pitched in the inning. Sam Crawford and Dawson Brown. And then Vanderbilt in the inning used Murphy, Smith, Fisher, and Maldonado. We used 8 pitchers in the 11th inning last night. 8, 4 on each side. And Siegel and Murphy both left the game because of injuries. And then the bullpens came in and couldn't, like Medich didn't get anybody out. Crawford got 2 outs. Brown got an out. And then Vanderbilt brought Ethan Smith in. He didn't get anybody out. Hugh Fisher walked the only batter that he was allowed to face. And then Maldonado had to come in and get the last out to get out of the game. I mean, that took 3 pitchers to get the last out for Vanderbilt. It got to be 14-11. So, it's good to have the depth, but you got to, and that's an unfortunate thing for Murphy. I mean, if he doesn't get the cramps, I mean, he's going to finish that. He's going to finish that game, and we're not talking about that at all. And it's a freak accident to Siegel as well, ball off his ankle. But, it happened, and he ended up throwing 8 pitchers in one inning, 4 on each side. And that's what carried you over the 1 a.m. threshold last night, that's for sure, because that was a long, long game.
Well, I think Murphy was running out of gas a little bit anyway. The velo, when he came in the game, the fastball was 97, 98, 99. By the time he got to that point, and maybe the leg cramp didn't help, the fastball was, I think, 92 to 94. So you could see the effectiveness winning. That kid threw I don't know what the number is, but I think the first 25 pitches or so that he threw were all fastballs, and that's how good it was. Now, the problem with that is you throw enough of those and somebody's sitting on one, right? And that's how the game gets tied. But, Barry, finals incredible stat from that game last night, 473 pitches thrown between the two teams, which is not ideal when you're in a Sunday night game.
Especially when it starts at 8:06. You're looking for a quick one, but yeah, a lot of pitches. I mean, both starters. Riley threw 98 in 4 innings. Tech starter Huff only threw 58, and had a reliever throw 57. Manley in 3 innings, and McIlvain 49, and Luke Murphy 63. Fortunately, for Vanderbilt there was a ton of strikes. They only walked 6. Georgia Tech, on the other hand, walked a dozen, and that does not help the pitch count total at all. A lot of walks for Georgia Tech, and that helped Vanderbilt out quite a bit, and Thomas with the big home run. But yeah, long game on the West End last night, as you can attest to, and a lot of pitches thrown in a regional championship game. It's kind of what you would expect in the last game of the series of a weekend. two teams that have used a lot of guys, the first couple of days, but certainly made for a long night.
Yeah, 203 pitches did not find the strike zone in that one, which makes for a 5-hour and 5-minute game. So anyway, Vanderbilt will move on to play East Carolina and Nashville next weekend. 3 teams will not be moving on. Let's start with the most surprising, the Florida Gators. And you talk about crazy games. You tell me if I get this right. Well, first of all, Florida loses a game to 4-seed South Florida. And South Florida was not a cupcake 4-seed, but it wasn't Wright State or some of the other ones we saw either. So there was that. And then the Gators get in a game where they pull Hunter Barco, their best starting pitcher, in the second inning. Now, look, for context, South Alabama was throwing its ace in a Saturday morning elimination game, and the kid was dealing. But as soon as Kevin O'Sullivan pulled Barco before the first inning was out and went to his closer, Jack Leftwich, I'm just thinking, I sort of get it, but if you got to get through a regional, I don't know how you do it. Once you pull Barco, I guess they were thinking maybe you can bring him back another game, having thrown so few pitches. But I'm just thinking, as soon as he makes that move, I'm thinking Florida's not getting out of this. And then we get to, what was it, I think the fourth inning, where there is a pitch thrown to the first South Alabama hitter of the inning. Time was called just before the pitch, and I think it was the right call. It was just a tough call. There's a ground ball hit, I think, to somewhere in the infield. Florida thinks for a moment it is registered an out. It did not. Gators get the next 2 outs. And then 9 singles and a double consecutively. 10 straight hits, Barry Allen. You never see that happen. And next thing you know, Florida's got a 10-run deficit, and basically that regional's over.
Yeah, and the third base umpire is the one that called the time, and I still don't know I still don't know exactly why he called timeout. The hitter that was then retired walked on the next pitch, and then, as you said, all broke loose. And when they scored the first 2 runs, Sully just went absolutely nuts. And he's yelling at the third base umpire, and he's hollering, "This on you." And he and the third base umpire had a very, very heated discussion. And the announcers go, "I think they've thrown him out of the game." And they didn't. And then the inning continued, and he yells from the dugout again, "These are all your runs. This is all on you." And the home plate umpire stepped in and warned him, and he came out and he gnawed on the third base umpire and the home plate umpire. He had to be out there for 5 or 6 minutes, maybe even 10. And he went back to the dugout and stayed in the dugout. And you kind of had a feeling when that happened twice, that third base umpire said, "You know what? I probably really royally screwed them." And I'm going to let this poor guy have his case, because he's mad at me, and he's probably right. He probably deserves to be mad at me. And that's kind of how I looked at it when I saw all that going on. Because if you're the umpire and you know you're right, you're not going to put up with that. You're going to dump somebody. But when you know you're wrong and you know you made a mistake, if you're a big enough man as an umpire, you're going to just take it. And both of those guys took it and wore it, and they just let him go. It was a bad scene for Florida. Then they had a long rain delay. It couldn't have been a worse day for Florida. Lose 19-1. I think I read that's the most runs ever allowed by an SEC team in a regional. They lost 18-1. You talk about losing to South Florida the day before. It's a pretty good game with Mace and Jancic on the mound, 2 pretty good pitchers. And they get in one of those long rain delays, as you can in Gainesville. Can anywhere, but certainly in Florida. So they lose Mace in like the 4th or 5th inning. South Florida loses their guy in like the 4th or 5th inning, and it just didn't work for Florida this weekend. And then that one inning just destroyed them. Where it was a 52 pitch inning, a 62 pitch inning, I believe it was. Just was not a good inning for them. Ended up just not being a good weekend for them. It was just everything went against them that could go against them, and it was just a struggle for them. They had 10 2-out hits, a 68 pitch inning, and the Jags scored 10 runs. They were up 4-1. They scored 10 runs and went up 14-1, and then piled it on at the end with 5 more runs and a bunch of home runs. But just not a just not the weekend that the Gators were looking for. And really and truly, as you wrote yesterday or wrote for Saturday, just not the season either. I mean, this is the preseason #1 team, and they were the 6th seed in the SEC tournament, and they were bounced 2 and out in the regional. Only the 6th time they've ever gone 0-2 in a regional, and it just wasn't the year that I think everybody thought the Gators were going to have.
Well, if people are new to this podcast, and we're probably going to have some about now, we are pretty locked in. We pay attention to everything. We have just said all year that if you're watching this team, it had issues, and everybody's sitting there going, well, they're playing better now in midseason. And yeah, they were, but it was against the bottom end of the schedule. And I did really think that leaving Hoover, that team had found something. I guess it had not. But I want to ask you something. There's been a lot of talk that, and I think even Mac Gassett said this himself, that they weren't as focused as they could have been. I may be butchering what he said, but it was something along those lines. There's been a lot of speculation that maybe with all the O'Sullivan to either LSU or potentially A&M talk, that Florida was distracted and maybe that just loomed over their heads a little too much this weekend. I don't know what the truth is, but are you buying that?
Well, certainly some merit, because there's another team out there that their coach is being courted or being rumored anyway for a job at maybe Texas A&M, and that's TCU. And they didn't go 0-2, but they went 1-2, and they were equally not as good as Florida this weekend. So there may be some merit to that. I mean, that's, you had a national seed, top 8 seed TCU get bounced at home, whose coach is, well, he might be the next coach at A&M, he might not. And then you got Florida, who's down, one of the top 16 seeds, and they get bounced 0-2, and well, their coach is rumored. There may be some merit to that. There could be, distractions. The coaches could be distracted. The kids could be distracted. I was kind of like you. I saw Florida at Hoover, play those games in Hoover, and I thought, boy, that team is going to be a really tough to handle. They made the change and put Hickey to third base. They increased their lineup a little bit, trying to make, improve their team, even as, this late in the year, he's not afraid to make some changes. I thought their pitching was good enough, and good enough arms. And then he comes out Saturday, you talk about Barco. I mean, I could see in the first inning just kind of running through his head. I mean, I obviously don't know what he's thinking, but you kind of see and look and go, well, this guy doesn't have it. I've seen coaches do this before. Get the guy out in the first inning and tell him go get his head right. We got another game tomorrow. We got another game Monday. I need you right for one of those games because you're going to start. I've seen that happen. In fact, in 1997, I believe it was, I think Doug Thompson was pitching for LSU against Alabama in the regular season, and he was awful. And Alabama was going to win the game, and it was early in the game, and Skip went out and made a change and took the ball from Doug Thompson, like in the first or second inning, and took the ball from him, brought another guy in, and he goes, you, Thompson, get your head right, because Sunday you're going to be standing here when we win the SEC championship. And he was. They brought him in relief on Sunday, and he pitched like the last 5 or 6 innings, and Antonini hit a 2-run homer off the scoreboard, and Furness hit a home run in the game, and LSU won the SEC championship in Tuscaloosa that Sunday with Doug Thompson on the mound. And he was also on the mound in the World Series when they beat Alabama for the national championship. So it's happened before where guys come out and you get your head right because you're going to be a key part of this run. And then they brought Leftwich in, and they brought Alamon in, and then, I mean, he's trying to do anything at this point. And then the 10-run inning, I guess you just kind of see him wave the flag, and it's not going to work after that, and they're not going to come back, and then they have the long rain delay. But yeah, it was just one of those years where you look at Florida and you think, well, this is it's a good team. They lose 2 out of 3 to Miami. They split with Florida State. I mean, they're used to winning, playing 6 games against these teams and going 4-2 at the worst. And this year they go 2-3 against them. And it just, barely won the first game against Miami and had to have a walk-off to beat Florida State in the game that they won on a Kalilau home run. but it just didn't seem like it was just for them this year. And they got hot in the middle of the year, but as you said, it was Auburn, Georgia, Missouri, Kentucky, and really could have lost two of those three games at Kentucky. That's where they got hot and started playing really well, and then it just once they got to the regional, it just seemed like it just kind of fizzed out on them. Really, really quick, and a really disappointing year for Florida.
Well, I tell you another team that had, I don't want to call it a disappointing year, an interesting year. I think actually, I haven't written about this, just I thought about it and I just haven't done it. I think that Carolina actually, I know that it was disappointing in the sense that South Carolina had a regional at home. And by the way, where were the fans for that thing? My goodness, that used to be a rabid fan base that showed up. I'm watching Carolina play for its life on Sunday morning and afternoon, and stands are, I don't know, half full, a third full. It just was astonishing to watch. Same thing at Florida, and maybe we want to talk about the attendance there, which I just cannot believe. As good as that program is, the fans just don't show up, and it just defies explanation to me. But Carolina, I felt like last we got a big look at that team. It was 2019. Carolina could not pitch at all. The offense was just mediocre, and you're wondering, where's this thing going? I thought that Mark Kingston at least built that bunch into an identity where they were really good on the mound. Now, part of that identity is they couldn't hit, and that's what Carolina's undoing wound up being. But I think there's always a bitter taste when your season ends the way it does. But I think Carolina, to me, took a much better step with this year. Now, I don't know how many of these kids are coming back, but I thought that was a good team that just it didn't catch that break again and again throughout the season for whatever reason. But I still think that's a good team. Again, what undid Carolina is what we figured would undo Carolina, and Wes Clark never really did hit on the big stage, although I think he did get a home run or two in that regional. But anyway, long way of saying, I think in spite of the way that it ended for South Carolina, there were some things there to be pleased about with that season.
I think so. I want to talk about the crowd. They played 3 games in their regional, and 2 of their times were horrible. They played at noon on Friday and noon on Sunday Eastern time. The Saturday night game with Old Dominion, that's the South Carolina that we all know. That place was jam-packed, and it was jumping. And I would say that outside of the Tennessee Wright State game Friday night, that might have been the next best game that I saw in the tournament. And 2-1, electric game. Both starters gave everything they had. Thomas Farr was really good for South Carolina. Gave up a home run and a bases loaded walk. The kids from Old Dominion were equally impressive. Hit 1 home run in the game. It's the team that leads the nation in home runs. They had a home run to go up 1-0 in the second inning. South Carolina tied it in the fourth with a sac fly and won it with Old Dominion won it with a bases loaded walk in the 8th inning. That to me was as good a game as there was in the tournament. But South Carolina for the weekend, I mean, just their pitching was outstanding. I mean, they can't. There's nobody that watched South Carolina and go, well, our pitching was awful or our pitching let us down. Your pitching did not let you down. You gave up 8 runs in 3 games, and you went 1-2 because your offense scored 7 runs, 7, and 4 in 1 game. You struck out 35 times in the series and walked 6 times. Your offense let you down in this series. They could not hit. They could not hit with men on base. They came around a little bit yesterday. Allen and Eister had a couple of hits apiece yesterday. They were 0 for 13 in the first 2 games of the series with like 8 or 9 strikeouts. That's your 1-2 hole hitters hitting ahead of Wes Clark, who homered Friday and didn't really do much else after that. But you can't win a regional with 7 runs. You can't. It doesn't matter how great your pitching is. And South Carolina's was really good all weekend long. Floyd pitched in 2 different games and was sensational. Sanders was really good Saturday night in the Old Dominion game. Carey would have had a better outing, left with a little neck injury. Friday's game against Virginia, but Bosnick pitched well. Everybody that Skylar Meade and Mark Kingston ran out there on that mound this weekend for South Carolina pitched really well, and they couldn't score, and their offense just was just gave them nothing against some pretty good pitching. Obviously, and we're not going to say that they were running out there getting guys like you and me, but they were facing some pretty good arms, but they did not score. You can't win a regional with 7 runs and striking out 35 times in a 3-game series like that. Trying to get to the super regional. So that was their problem this weekend, was their offense. It certainly was not their pitching, and they have to be real excited about the pitching of some of these guys. Who's coming back? Who'll be back next year? But they have a good foundation on the mound for 2021 or 2022.
Another team that I thought that this was a good ending to the season. No, you want to go further than Alabama did, but I think with all that Alabama's been through, the fact that program's been so down, the fact that they get their stud pitcher hurt, he's never really a factor all year, Alabama winning a game in a regional, to me, was a huge step for that program.
I think getting there was a huge step for them. And then to go, obviously when you see the bracket, you're thinking, well, at least they'll beat Ryder. You thought they would, and they did. And it wasn't the prettiest of wins of all, but they won. And Dylan Smith pitched really well. I kind of had to think of, I thought myself thinking going into Saturday, having watched a little bit of the Ryder Louisiana Tech game Friday night, thinking, if you really want to make a run here, you probably don't throw Dylan Smith against Ryder. And then with only scoring 3 runs, as they did, if they pitched somebody else, they could have gotten beat and they would have been out in 2. So you want that win. So probably the right decision now looking back on it, throwing Dylan Smith, who pitched a whale of a game, complete game, first complete game for Alabama in a regional since 14. As a matter of fact, their last 2 NCAA tournament wins were complete game victories by Dylan Smith and Jeffrey Bramlett, 2,500 days apart as they were. But to get there was a big step for them, and then to win a game, even though it's against Ryder, who won the MAC, beating Fairfield and Fairfield getting the at-large for the year they had, that's a big step for them. And they had a chance yesterday. They, couldn't keep it in the park with Tech, and then, of course, Tech couldn't keep it in the park with them. I mean, that's a little park. I thought there were 2 or 3 balls that were pop-ups that got out. I'm like, man, this is a bandbox. And they say to right center field, if the wind's blowing out, or even if it's not blowing out, if you get it to right or right center, you got a better than 90% chance of getting it into stands, and a lot of those did. But it was a year that, you look at them, they're a 12-win SEC team. They got in the tournament, just the 3rd SEC team ever to do that with 12 wins. They didn't get a really difficult draw, I didn't think. But they're in. They got in. They lost to NC State, who bashed their way through that regional. I think you picked them to win that, and they bashed Alabama, and they bashed Louisiana Tech twice and got through there. And it will be a good foe for Arkansas. And if Arkansas wins today, there'll be a good competition for them in the super regional. But, Alabama got in, got the win over Ryder, was competitive in the game against Tech, not so much against NC State, but, something for them to build on in the future, because it's the first tournament they'd been in since 2014. And I think to get in and win a game, I think they're very happy with where they are right now.
Okay, Barry, let's close it out here. I'm looking at the bracket. There's still 8 regionals that have not been decided as of Monday night. Now, you're the historian of this podcast. I've watched a lot of college baseball, but I don't even tip the scales compared to what you've seen. I don't remember a Monday where we had 8 regionals that had not been decided. And look, this isn't a case other than, I guess, Starkville, where rain has really been a factor and pushed games back. Is that highly unusual, or am I just dreaming this?
No, I think it's a little unusual. I mean, Mississippi State and Campbell is a weather thing. I think if they don't get 2.5 inches of rain in Starkville yesterday, that's done and over with. But they couldn't start the Campbell VCU game till 6:30 last night, and it went pert near 5 hours as Campbell won 19-10. Sound more like lacrosse than baseball. So not fair to make Mississippi State and Campbell turn around and play again at 11 o'clock. They made that decision early in the day. We're going to play one game at 6:30, and then the winner is going to play Mississippi State at 11 Central. And if there's a second game, which I don't think there will be, it would be today at 3. But then, a lot of the if games, Ole Miss and Southern Miss, Nebraska, Arkansas, Old Dominion, Virginia, Stanford, UC Irvine, Dallas Baptist, Oregon State, LSU, Oregon. I mean, and then South Florida and South Alabama. Likely could have been a 7th game in that series too. They had a weather delay yesterday. The game was suspended in the 5th inning. They'll finish it today in Gainesville. So a lot of games still to go. Two by weather and some just by the necessary, to play the 7th game, that if necessary game. So at least it'll keep your attention on a Monday afternoon and a Monday night with a busy day of college baseball. But a little unusual to see that many games, on the last day. But I think that kind of shows how competitive the sport is and how competitive this bracket actually was, in a year that we didn't really know what was going on with, some of the restrictions that we still had. It looks like that there were some, as we looked at the brackets last week and we talked about some of the competitive brackets, it looked like the committee really did a nice job and put some competitive brackets together. And we're seeing that with a lot of game 7s today.
The one thing that did surprise me nationally, Notre Dame, my goodness, I think Notre Dame scored, if I counted it correctly, 50 runs and gave up 5 in a regional that, frankly, I did not have the Irish getting out of. Man, talk about proving me wrong with an exclamation point. I thought that was just a really tough regional. I thought there were 4 good teams in there with Central Michigan, Michigan, and UConn. Michigan, of course, had some recent history of success under Eric Bakich going to the College World Series final and continuing to bring in talent. That was the thing that shocked me. Texas got the easy path that I thought it had. But any other parting thoughts on the field or anything we didn't get to today? And again, we'll do this on Tuesday, and we'll talk about the other 4 regionals involving SEC teams that haven't been decided. Again, that's Mississippi State, Ole Miss, Arkansas, and LSU, the 4 teams involved in that. But was there anything worth a mention, Barry, that we did not get to today?
Well, we talked about it a little bit, but the Old Dominion's still in play as the 15, but playing on the road. They play Virginia tonight. And then the Dallas Baptist, Oregon State. Those 2 regional winners are going to match up in the Super Regional. So you're going to have a potential Dallas Baptist, Old Dominion, could be winner go to Omaha. Or you could have a Virginia, Oregon State winner go to Omaha. So one of those 4 teams will be in Omaha because they're playing each other, and because that they're all on the road. Where will that Super Regional be? I would think that Old Dominion, if they win, because they're a national seed, they would get priority as to close proximity to. Would they play it again in Columbia? I mean, they're comfortable there. They just played there. Would they say, hey, you know what? We'll stick it here if South Carolina's okay with that and play the Super Regional in Columbia, or will they try to maybe go to East Carolina somewhere? But there has to be one of the 16 sites that hosted this week, unless the NCAA lets up on that. But that to me is an interesting thing that's going to come about today. And then the Nebraska and Arkansas has been compelling. They've split 2 games. They play their last game tonight. And just touch on this a little bit for Nebraska. They gave Arkansas a little bit of their own medicine last night. They have a kid that's the shortstop, really good player. Schwellenbach came in from shortstop to the mound and pitched 4 2/3 scoreless innings last night. It was his longest outing of the year. Kind of a Kevin Kopps kind of guy that shuts it down at the end of the game. And, he had a 2-run single in the game that helped them win. And he was a big deal for them last night. And it looked like when they brought him in the game on the mound, Nebraska's confidence went up, kind of like Arkansas with Kevin Kopps. And an interesting side note with him, his brother is Mason Schwellenbach. He played for Central Methodist in the NAIA. He was an All-American at Central Methodist this year, and he pitched 7 innings and a win over Faulkner. and had a double and a home run in the NAIA World Series last week as they finished second to Georgia Gwinnett College. So the Schwellenbachs are doing something right in baseball. Mom and Dad got the baseball genes working for them, and because they got two good young guys playing college baseball and doing really well. So that'll be interesting with Nebraska Arkansas in the final game tonight. And I doubt Schwellenbach would be available again tonight. He threw a career high pitches. Now Copps, who wasn't available last night, would be available tonight, and we'll see how that works out and shakes out. And then the last thing, how many more games for LSU and Paul Maneri as he's announced his retirement? They've at least got one more as they forced the 7th game with a really good performance at Oregon last night.
All right. Well, we'll be talking about plenty more baseball on Tuesday's show when we hopefully wrap up those 4 regionals. Thank you for listening to this episode of 14. He's Barry Allen. I'm Chris Lee. We'll see you back again on Tuesday. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at 14 Southeastern. Go to the website, southeastern14.com, for our written content. Thank you for listening. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe where you get your podcast, and we will see you again on Tuesday.